Wait, I can
Oh.
Oh, I'm fine.
I've got a 5-year-old used to those.
It's just a little, yeah.
Right, maybe you tell a story. You can tell a story.
Well, of course, whose photo album is this? I was wondering if it has something to do with Karl Steg, but I'm not really. No, I know who it is. It's Joël et Alain. This is Günther, the father of Regine, whom you visited. See, Günther Levy. And you are not surprised, I don't have to mention the name, who this is, a very famous picture of Michael Eisemann. And
where was it taken?
I think across the street. Okay. So I don't know how well you can read. The first pictures are not for any one of you to talk a lot, but we thought to give honor to this baby, Hans David Blum, less than a year old, probably a couple of weeks, and his family gathering for the golden wedding of his parents, Gideon Blum and Mathilde Grumbach. So Bob Bear is, I think, almost at home, arriving in Boston, the airport, and this is his great-grandfather, Raphael Bear, and Helene Geismar, and they lived across the street. So this is the house where his grandfather and his grandfather's brother Hermann grew up. Stillhalten. Okay, I'll try. So we thought to show you this very intimate picture taken by Heinz Bear of his parents. Heinz Bear, Bob Bear's father. And it also tells, think of Rhonda and Carl. They mention it today with the students. The interior of the apartment, the linen, the towel hanging there, I believe. Okay. So these are the two sisters and a cousin, small children up there, and so that's Heinz and Margot and Ruth Bear. Okay. Okay, Hermann and Fanny and Ruth were, all three of them, deported to Gurs. Margot was deported from Amsterdam with her 2-year-old child and her husband to Auschwitz. She was a dentist, Ruth was a doctor, and the cousin Heinz had his doctorate in law. Okay, so now,
so this is actually the only photo that I have of my great-grandmother, Babette Bensinger Model, and Leopold Model. Leopold died, I think, just before the war. 1934. They had 3 children, all born here in Breisach. Their oldest, I think, was Ida, who died of the Spanish flu, I think, based on her year of death. And they had a son, Louis, who died in 24, I think. And then their third child was my grandmother, Martha Model, who married someone who lived in Lorach, and I have since found out the relationship to, yes, here, Martha. The far left is my aunt Inga Beata, who was called Ingeborg until she moved to the United States. Then Martha Model, my father, Sigbert Bodenheimer, who went by Bert once he came to the United States, and my grandfather, Alfred Bodenheimer, who was the president of the synagogue in Lorach for most of the 1930s and knew Ronya's father probably very well since he was the cantor there in Lorach, and that was a connection I just found out while we were here. So the Bodenheimer family was very fortunate and was able to leave Lorach in the spring of 1939 after Alfred had been released in January from Dachau, as many men were. He was a veteran of World War I, and I think that that was one of the ways that people got released. They had visas to the United States and made it to the United States in May of 1939. Babetta Model and Alfred's mother, Fredrika Bodenheimer, and then a great aunt of mine, all moved into the house that they lived in Lorach, I think with the hope that they would eventually be able to escape to Basel. But unfortunately, they were still here when the transports began to Gurs, and all three of them went to Gurs. My Bodenheimer great-grandmother, Fredrika, I think died right after liberation, perhaps. My Babetta Model, who was from here, actually survived, and I'm not sure of the exact route, but ended up in Havana, Cuba, and I have found the records of her immigration into the United States, and she fortunately survived to 1952, was, I think, just in her 80s in New York, so at least had a peaceful end of her life after a difficult time. I have the great aunt. I'm a little less sure of when she passed. I think it was also while they were in Gurs. I don't think she survived. Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. So this would be my great uncle, Louis Model, who is buried in the new cemetery. And then I think there's one of Ida Model also. I don't know, or that one I was less sure about, so you may not have that one. Yeah.
These are pictures that I inherited. I inherited these pictures from my grandparents through my parents. And Rosa Borgheimer was born in Kippenheim and married Joseph on the left. And they lived in Strasbourg, and after World War I moved to Stuttgart, and that's where my mother, Margot, met my father, Fritz. Fritz was originally born in Austria. This way? Okay. All right, it's a long family history, so I won't bore you with it, but these are the pictures that happen to be hanging in our living room, and I've had them for quite a few years, and I really treasure them. And that's that. As I said, they moved to Tel Aviv in 1938. My parents moved in 1936 from Stuttgart, and I was born in Tel Aviv in 1938. My sister Ruth was born in 1944, and she lives in Florida, in Englewood, Florida. My wife Marlena is here with me, and you've already met her. She has something to say.
If you look at his grandfather,
there's a little bit of resemblance to Uri and his grandfather. I always said that.
And Larry Borkheimer also has the same features. Nothing to be bragging about. Hollywood has not called us for it.
So there are so many Eisenmans here. Who wants to speak? Ella, maybe. Michelle?
Laura?
Oh, Ella's coming too.
Ella has been wanting to speak since we gotten here.
No.
Go ahead, what do you want to say, Ella?
I don't know.
It's appropriate that Ella will want to speak. And maybe,
I want to.
okay. And when she's old enough, hopefully she'll remember coming here for the first time and seeing her great-great-grandfather and learning more about his family, which is all about the Blue House and what it stands for our family. Obviously, the Blue House is about Michael Eisman. It was his home, it was my father's home. And we are always so gratified and so honored to be part of events like this here at the Blue House because they are so very meaningful. And in this picture, you see both Ludwig and Eyal. This is the first time Eyal Barzilai is here to enjoy and appreciate what has been created around this family that we miss so terribly and are very grateful for everything that surrounds us here.
Those are the Barzilais. For those who do not understand the relationship or the connection, Barzilai is the Hebrew translation of Eisenman. When a lot of Jews have flew to Israel or immigrated to Israel, at a certain point they changed their European names into the Hebrew translation. By the way, not only European Jews, but also Jews that came from Arab countries. So you would find today in Israel Barzilais that originated not only from Eisenman, which is iron, Barzel in Hebrew, but also from Hadad in Yemen, which is the iron in Arab. In any event, in this picture, you would see Ludwig on the right bottom, and my grandmother, Shoshana, she is originated from Romania. And in this picture, you can see Ludwig at the transition that he has gone through from relatively secular Jew into an Orthodox Jew. He ended up to be a very devoted Orthodox Jew. At the top, you would see my father and his three brothers, the four sons of Ludwig. My father is the only one who left today. Unfortunately, his three brothers passed. And this was, I think, early in the 70s, when I was 2 years or 3 years old. Clara has visited Israel, and this is where the picture was taken. My father, Yitzhak, is the second on the left. And his brother, Michael, which is on the left side, named after Michael. And Avraham on his right, and Shlomo on the right side. Unfortunately, all three of them have passed away as well. So, thank you very much.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
What does your father think about your visit here?
Unfortunately, my father is not in good good health those days. He a little bit deteriorated. So to the extent he comprehend, he's very happy, and he has memories. He himself been here, I think 10 years ago with my mother, or 15 years ago, I can't recall exactly. And he is keeping track of all the pictures that I'm sending, so to that extent, I'm doing a little mitzvah.
Oh, hi. This is the only picture I have of my father's parents. Who were living in Cologne. My grandmother Clotilde and my grandfather, who's actually Yaakov, but we consider him Robert. I'm named after him. I'm afraid I don't really know when this was taken. Sometime between the wars, I should think. And I'm very, very, very grateful to have even this. My father escaped to the United States, and he escaped with nothing. And he didn't really show much interest in looking backwards. But I am very pleased to say that with the help of Christiana and Leskin and the Blue House, that I'll be dedicating Stolperstein to the three of them in October in Cologne.
Well, this is actually, that's my mother in the middle, the little girl. And
Which year?
when?
What year it was taken?
Oh, it must be about 1937, probably, beginning of 1938. But this is actually the Beck family, which is from Lurach. My grandmother was a Geismar, our grandfather, or Judy, my great-grandfather, was from Breisach, and he was married to Judith Beck Geismar, who's the second from the left, and these are all of her siblings. She had 9 of them. There was Ludwig, and it doesn't matter the order, Samuel, and oh my gosh, Babette, and Emma, and Adele, and Bernhard, and Isaac, and on the bottom is the next generation. My grandmother is to the right of my mother, of the little girl, and to the left is, I think that's Trudy Beck? No, is that? Erna Beck, who we're actually going to go see her daughter, who's in assisted living in Strasbourg after this. But it's mostly the Beck family. Unfortunately, many of them were killed during the war. Many of them that were there, Adele and Isaac and Samuel, were all, a couple of them died in Gurs, and a couple of them were unfortunately sent to Auschwitz.
And our great-grandmother made it to the United States, Judith.
Yes. Our great-grandmother, our grandmother, and the woman next to her, the sister, actually the 3 sisters on the left, all survived.
This is a very moving picture, and with the help of Andrea and her very sophisticated work, we are able now to have a much better copy, because she photographed it on the wall in a Günzburger descendants apartment. It's Heinrich Günzburger, beer brewer, his second wife Sarah Rose from Lichtenau, and children from first and second marriage. And so these are the Lörrach. She's Lina Weil from Lörrach, marrying Siegbert, I believe it was his name, Sigmund Günzburger, born in Breisach. And the reason for taking this picture in 1901 was that the oldest son, Seligman, came home from America with his American wife and 2 little daughters. And so they all lined up for this wonderful photo, which we use for every tour we give, explaining much more. And for example, we can go to the new cemetery, not tomorrow, but Monday if you like to, and you find this couple the relatives created the first grave on the new cemetery for a couple. You remember that there's a women's side, men's side, a children's section, but Dorothea Günzburger and her husband Karl Model were the first ones to decide to be buried in one grave. Okay, we just thought you might enjoy this picture. Günzburgers. So here. First picture of Karl Steg.
This is probably the first picture of me. I'm the one in the baby carriage there. And the person who is pushing the carriage is my mother. It's my mother, whose name was Margareta, better known as Gretel. Her maiden name was Kahn, and she was the daughter of Nathan and Bertha Kahn, both born here in Breisach. I was born in Karlsruhe in 1937, so this picture was taken certainly before I was 1 year old. My mother, though living in Karlsruhe for most of her adult life, always visited her parents in Breisach as often as she could, and obviously brought me down for them to see, probably. It may have been the first time. This is not a picture from my archive at all. This is a picture that my mother found after she was given a little book after visiting Breisach for the first time by the mayor's office about the history of Breisach, and saw herself in that picture. And she also saw herself in a school picture, which we must have somewhere. So anyway, my mother and my family emigrated to the United States in January 1939. My father, having been released from Dachau after having been imprisoned there in Kristallnacht in 1938, fortunately was able to get out. And luckily, we lost nobody in the Holocaust. We were the last ones in our family to leave. But this is the first picture of me, as far as I know. But you can't see me.
It's Levi family. It's Hermann Levi and his wife Amalie, and Hermann and Amalie were also deported to Gürs. Amalie survived. So surprisingly, I find it very difficult to find out how this happened, how they managed to survive. But this is from the family in Switzerland. We thought to have another picture that you might find interesting.
Cette photo, c'est mon grand-père et ma grand-mère, Julie et Berthold. Et là, cette photo, elle est très importante parce qu'on voit leur amour. C'est un beau souvenir. Ouais.
So this is a picture of his grandfather, Berthold Levi, and his grandmother, Julie. And he really finds this picture very moving because you can see the love between the two of them.
Là, on voit les frères et sœurs de ma maman. Voilà. Rosa, qui est décédée dans les camps. Et Eric, pareil. Betty, qui est partie en Amérique. Et Rona, qui est décédée aussi dans les camps. On ne sait pas où. Ouais. Ouais, c'est triste. Et il manque Bruno sur la photo.
So these are 4 of his mother Gretel's siblings. Rosa, who died in Auschwitz or another camp, we're not sure. Erik, who died in Auschwitz, that we're sure. Rena, who also died in Auschwitz. And Betty, who was able to emigrate to London and then to the US. And he wanted to add that one brother, Bruno, who survived, is not pictured.
We are very sad that we don't know about Bruno because he was in the resistance in France, and we would like to know more. And of course, I'm very grateful. Now I want to lighten up a bit because there's a bit funny story. I tell you what kind of stories we meet during our research. So Betty actually was born in UK in 1941, I believe, and she never got to know anything about her father. Her mother would not tell anything until she died, and I was able to meet her mother. So, but there was a rumor that Hans-Joachim Breisacher would be maybe the father of Margaret, the wonderful lady who's still living, and we are in touch with her. She knows we are here together. And Hans-Joachim, Hans-Joachim's mother wrote letters from Gurs, from France, where you could use only 25 words, so this Red Cross formula, and always mentioned Betty, which indicated to us also that maybe there was a love story, and she treated her in these letters like a daughter-in-law, you know. But Margaret told us that some 2-3 years ago she did a DNA test. I think it's very popular in America to do your DNA, and out came something very, very, very different. Not Hans-Joachim Breisacher. We have to skip thinking that. But I won't tell you the story. It's really interesting, but I'm also, I shouldn't say that. So that, but you know, this,
you have to tell us.
No, I think she was in a shock, and not a person she knew, but I don't know how this works with a DNA test. We can't get into it. How you really come down with you assume that this person was your father, but her mother was silent about that, and that was a big topic in her life. Okay.
So this is my grandmother, Sita Uffenheimer, and my grandfather, Nathan Uffenheimer. I'm named after Nathan. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to meet Nathan. He died a few years before the war. Sita, actually, during the war, she was born, both of them were born here, obviously, and she went to work in Munich, kind of escaped, and then she got wound up, and she got transported to Riga, and from what we know, she got shot in one of the lineup, and we don't know much about the exact date that she was murdered. So hopefully through some research we can find out more about her.
And your big sister is named after her?
Yeah, so my older sister is named after Sita.
And they have 3 children?
That's my other sister, Tuvik.
He's a better speaker, he lives in America. Live in Israel. So they had 3 children. The big one, Benjamin,
my father, Martin, and small sister, Rosa, that now when I'm looking at her, they are very similar in their faces. She was Nathan's second wife. He had children, I don't know, 4 children or 2 or 3 children from his first wife. And so they had the 3 brothers and sisters. They had 3 half brothers and sisters, and during the war or before the war, Sita helped one of them to go to Argentina and prepare for them a place to go when the war will start, because they all understood that the war will start. She could not get there somehow. He continued to live there, and there is a book that is written on the letters that were written between her and him, that open up really things about this period. Very interesting book that is going back on the Oppenheimer generation. I think 3 or 4 back generations. 10 generation. Only 10. Okay. And one of the generation, only I think 3 generations away, they had a factory here in Breisach, a very special factory that helped the army, and was using also prisoners to help them in the factory. So it's really here in Breisach, and we saw the sign on it and the Oppenheimer. So we feel the rhythm of the history of our family still ringing.
Yeah, one thing I didn't know, how famous the Oppenheimers were here. I did not. And also when we go to the graveyards, see so many Oppenheimers. So I'm committed to research it more. You can see my father is actually marked.
Is that the correct one?
That's the correct one, according to Sita, my sister. She said it's the Navy or the sailor haircut. So it's probably were taken in his kindergarten somewhere. So that is probably the second youngest picture of him. Yeah. Those are our parents. On the right side is my beautiful father, and on the left side is my mother, his wife, Tzipora. She actually was part of the Tehran kids, came from Poland through Russia and came to Israel, and they met in Israel. My father was into construction. He built a lot of buildings in Israel and also abroad.
So yesterday we had the dinner at the Turkish restaurant Cappadocian, and I mentioned that the house that stood there, the house before the house, belonged to Luise and Siegfried Weil, with the nickname Eisenweil, Ironweil. They had a hardware store, were really very, very busy merchants. Luise packed until midnight the parcels for the customers for the next day, and then in the morning she went to the hairdresser to look well for the store. Mrs. Eisenman was a bit critical about her, that she got up so late. Between this household, and they were good friends. But so I learned the story from their daughter. but she worked until late to get everything ready for the next day. So that was Siegfried, and you see it's a very picture grabbed, and it belonged to their daughter Hannelore, who was on the Kindertransport to Switzerland and missed, of course, her parents very, very much, who were deported from a little town close to Augsburg with the oldest son, Alfred, and perished in Majdanek. The brother wrote letters from there. He was killed later than his parents, a year later. He wrote letters to his little sisters in Switzerland, not saying anything about his fate, but encouraging them to learn and being very, very nice and loving. So there are these amazing letters from the camp to the two sisters in Switzerland. This picture is wandering through the world. I guess you know, maybe. Holocaust Museum, British War Museum, or Memorial de la Shoah. I think they exchange it. And it certainly is not taken by Heinz Beer, because he's sitting here. Heinz Beer, Hans Frank. We don't know yet who Schwule is. They all went with nicknames. Hans Wurmser, interesting. And we think that the man in the back with a cigar in the mouth is Diane's grandfather. So Diane, where are you?
Yes, that's supposedly my grandfather, Emil Weil, who owned a liquor store in town where we were eating last night in the area there. And the young boy, the second on the right, is my uncle Ludwig Weil. He looks exactly like my father, but I figured out from the date of the picture and the ages of these boys that it had to have been Ludwig, who was 3 years older, born in 1913. I didn't realize that the picture was floating around the world. I have it bookmarked on my computer, but anyhow, unfortunately I don't have any more pictures, and don't have a picture of my grandmother. So
that's my grandmother, Emily. And she came, I guess that's in front of her house, which is, Chris John can tell me better where her house was.
Across the street.
Across the street. But it doesn't exist anymore, so that's why I don't know it. Anyway, she came to America. Wow. She came to America in 1938. She sent my mother by herself when she was 16 in 1936, and my mother's sister, Erna, by herself the next year in 37, and then she came in 38. And they were able to get out because, that's my mother on the right, my grandmother sitting, and my Aunt Erna on the left. They were in America by then. Anyway, they were able to get out because their father, my grandfather Herman, who died when my mother was 5, had a sister who had emigrated earlier to Yonkers, New York. So she sponsored them. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But there's one person who definitely would have loved to be here with us. That's Leslie Schaffel, who was here with her mother and her daughter and her husband last June. And she sent us this photo. And these are Emilie Geismar, Emilie Schwab, née Geismar, on the right side, the so-called Bärenwirtin. The Bären was across the street. And Bertli K. née Grumbach, born in St. Blasien in the middle of the Black Forest, made it to America with her husband and 2 children. And Josephine Geismar married a Dreyfus. So these 3 are refugees, as you can see. I don't have to say that. Happy, happy, happy in the U.S. And the one, Hannah, had already lived in America for quite a while. She was another sister and had married a Bergheimer from Breisach. And at this point, we don't have a Schindler's List, but we can work for a Hermann Kleefeld list, because he was sponsoring at least 10 or more people from Breisach, Hermann Kleefeld. So we should all remember his name. His grandson doesn't know anything about it. So in that family, you would think, there would be a story of being proud and honoring the grandfather, but they hardly knew anything about it. Okay? Well, we have a big get-together here, but this was a smaller get-together, right, Elaine?
Oh my goodness.
Probably in Paris.
Yeah.
Paula, your mother, Elaine, as a beautiful young lady, and Theo Günzburger, Theo and Emma Günzburger. Theo was the last Günzburger in Breisach. He was a son of a butcher. And Theo is giving us many miracles and questions, because he was on a transport to Auschwitz and he survived, and we don't know how. Interesting outfit. There is a group of youngsters who all went to Palestine and created families there. Lothar Kleefeld, Sigmar Breisacher. Who else is there? The others are on the other picture. Walter Breisacher. Okay, go to the next. So here's again Hans Weil, Diane. So we're happy to have your uncle and your father on these pictures. And Sigmar, Lothar, and Semimok were the 3 going to Palestine. And there's Martin Uffenheimer and his brother Benno. And Richard Levy, one of 2 brothers, going to Palestine. And Alan Dreyfus, who was here with us in 2000 also. So I think wonderful pictures, and really pictures they probably got together as a goodbye picture.
There's one last one.
Another one. Hans Blum. I think we have to work on the identification still. So we hope that you help us with all kinds of questions, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Who wants to comment? Okay. Thank you, Mike, for your patience with us and your work. And thank Olivia.